20 years after it ended, the Cold War was already gathering dust on the shells of history. The threat of nuclear strikes from east to west and vice versa is a fading memory. But one remaining remnant of that era continues to linger. It's the law used to impose the US trade embargo against Cuba. It's about to expire, and whilst tensions have eased under President Obama, the US is still insisting on democratic reforms before lifting the embargo. Our man in Havana, Michael Voss, sent us this report.
The old American cars running on handmade and cannibalized parts are a reminder of just how long Cuba's been under the US trade embargo. It's a policy handed down by successive administrations going back to John F. Kennedy. Now Barack Obama has made it his own. There's disappointment in the Fife family. 9-year-old Frank suffers from liver cancer and he can't get the drugs he most needs because they're manufactured in the United States. It's been very difficult, his mother Lisette told me. We have to rely on similar medicines which are more risky, and at times he's had adverse reactions. It's an issue which leaves the US isolated internationally. Every year, the United Nations General Assembly votes overwhelmingly to condemn the sanctions, which also impact on UN humanitarian work on the island.
The embargo limits our ability to import materials both for development projects like antiretroviral drugs for people with HIV and humanitarian assistance. In the 3 major hurricanes that hit Cuba in 2008, we launched a humanitarian response and we could not import roofing materials, tools, or emergency food from the United States.
Relations have eased under Barack Obama. The mood is less confrontational, and the two sides have started to cooperate over a range of issues such as immigration and direct mail services. But in a statement issued last week, the Cuban authorities described the changes so far as little more than a coat of paint slapped on these sanctions.
Nothing. We hoped for lots of good things from Obama, but we haven't seen them. I think there are lots of vested internal interests there. He arrived with good intention, but nothing's happened.
I was really hoping that things would get much better, both from the American side and here in Cuba, but it's all talk.
Since taking over the presidency from his brother Fidel, Raul Castro has introduced only minor reforms, and in a recent speech said that he'd not been elected to return capitalism to Cuba. The Cold War may be over, but this is one conflict which has yet to be resolved. Michael Voss, BBC News, Havana.
Now, rock groups from several countries are in Cuba, playing in what's believed to be the largest ever rock concert on the island. Sunday's show, called Peace Without Borders, includes 15 well-known bands from Cuba, other Latin American countries and Spain. But the organizer, the Miami-based Colombian singer Juanes, says he's received death threats from groups in the US who oppose Cuba's communist regime. Well, our correspondent in Havana is Michael Voss, and he gave us this update.
It's absolutely packed here in Revolution Square. There's never been a free open-air concert like this ever before. When Pope John Paul II gave his historic mass in this same place just over 10 years ago, there were about 250,000 people. We estimate that there's double that number here now, between 400,000 and 500,000 people. It's Revolution Square. This is the scene of where it's really the center of power in Cuba. I don't know if you can see behind me, but there's a red flag, there's a Cuban flag flying over there. Behind that is the headquarters of the Communist Party. And this is the square where normally when I come here, it's to cover the big May Day parades, and there are red flags everywhere. Now, as you can probably see, everyone is dressed in white. There are white flags, white shirts, and that's the message of this, Peace Without Borders. The organizer, Juanes, says it's meant to be a musical, not a political event about bringing people together.
How controversial is this concert?
It is turning out to be a controversial concert, but in Miami rather than in Cuba. There is a section of the anti-Castro exile community who believe that Cuba needs to be isolated and should have no contact with the outside world. They're the ones that opposed this, and actually someone within that community sent death threats to the organizer, the Colombian star Juanes. But it's gone ahead. Interestingly enough, dissidents on the islands are opposed to the anti-Castro groups in Miami. A bunch of prisoners here, some very senior dissidents, all signed a letter saying they thought this was a great idea for bringing people together. And interestingly, President Barack Obama recently said that he approved of the concert, and Secretary of State Hillary Clinton posed for photographs with Juanes before he came here. So the Obama administration is distancing itself from the hardliners in Miami.
And that was Michael Voss reporting there.
Cuba is opening up to market forces and redistributing land. It's the biggest development of its kind since Fidel Castro's revolution in 1959. His brother, President Raúl, has begun leasing millions of acres of unused state land to private farmers. The hope is to increase food production and reduce imports. The BBC's Michael Voss reports now from the central province of Camagüey.
Fresh lettuce at the height of summer is a rarity in Cuba, but this small family farm is working hard to meet demand. It's part of a cooperative made up of individual smallholders who club together for credit and supplies. Private farmers own less than a third of the land, but produce almost 3/4 of the island's food. In the past, this private sector was tolerated. Now it's being actively encouraged.
There's
been an enormous difference in the last 2 years. They're paying a lot more attention to us. They've helped with irrigation as well as offering more land. Now we earn more money because we're selling more food.
Jorge Alcides is a new member of the cooperative. His family farm has a mix of dairy, cattle and crops, all of it on disused land which 2 years ago belonged to a state farm. It's part of an extra 120 hectares which the co-op has acquired, all of it, though, in need of attention. Cuba's large state-run collective farms have allowed vast tracts of fertile land to go to waste, much of it covered by a dense weed called marabou. It's like a jungle in here. Once the marabou takes hold, nothing else will grow and the cattle can't graze. And it's a nightmare to get rid of. So far, 80,000 Cubans have been given tracts of land to clear, the first phase of a 2 million hectare transfer. The state is also starting to help with access to fuel, tractors and bulldozers. But much of the work must still be done by hand. It's one reason why the authorities have turned to private farmers to take on the task.
Now I'm happy working. It's different when you do it for yourself rather than being paid a wage.
Michael Voss, BBC News, Camagüey Province, Cuba.
Welcome, I'm Alistair Yates. The president of Cuba, Raúl Castro, has accused the United States of continuing to treat Latin America as its backyard. Speaking at a regional summit of left-wing leaders, Alba, Mr. Castro expressed anger over a recent deal granting US forces access to Colombian military bases. The BBC's Michael Voss reports from Havana.
Alba is a left-wing alliance set up 5 years ago as a radical alternative to America's free trade policies in the region. Cuba helped create it, but it's mainly financed by oil-rich Venezuela's president, Hugo Chavez. In a language reminiscent of the Cold War, Cuba's president, Raúl Castro, opened the summit with an attack on US policies in the region.
On the one side, there's an exploitative model of dependence, subordinated to the interests of the empire, as the US is often referred to here. On the other, the advance of revolutionary and progressive forces, representing the dispossessed.
9 countries are now members. Bolivia's recently re-elected president, Evo Morales, is here, along with Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua. 2 English-speaking countries joined recently, Antigua, along with St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Honduras is represented by the former foreign minister of its deposed president, Manuel Zelaya. Raul Castro accused the US of having a role in the coup and attacked it for supporting the recent elections, which he called a farce. Relations between Cuba and the United States have eased since the election of Barack Obama, but hopes of a major breakthrough are starting to fade. Now, the ALBA alliance offers Raul Castro and Venezuela's Hugo Chavez a solid platform from which to challenge US policies and interests across Latin America. Michael Voss, BBC News, Havana.
Welcome back. Their music is among Cuba's greatest exports, and through it the Buena Vista Social Club has gained fans worldwide. After more than 40 years of US sanctions, the musicians' unique rhythm embodies a distinct culture which has flourished in the island nation. All next week we'll have special coverage from Inside Cuba, and we begin tonight with Michael Voss's report on the Buena Vista Beat.
Cuban music is one of the attractions which draws so many visitors to this Caribbean island. Most popular of all, the traditional rhythms of the Buena Vista Social Club, made famous a decade ago with the award-winning film.